They are bright.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. To start off the night, I'm going to thank all of our co-sponsors. We have some fantastic co-sponsors of this event that have made this night possible. We have the Cross Seekers Christian Fellowship, which is associated with BYUSA. We have the Office of Belonging and the University Chaplain. And we have the BYU Council for Interfaith Engagement. All of them have been fantastic in helping us make this happen, so we'd like to recognize them. This event tonight is in line with the BYU Statement on Belonging, which states that we value and embrace the variety of individual characteristics, life experiences and circumstances, perspectives, talents, and gifts of each member of the community and the richness and strength they bring to our community. So we're really excited to highlight all of these fantastic ladies tonight in discussing their faith and how they apply it in their lives. My name is Leah Merritt. I am a Christian student here at BYU, one of the few students here that's not a Latter-day Saint. I am a research assistant at the BYU Office of Belonging. I am president of the Cross Seekers Christian Fellowship, and I'm a student fellow on the BYU Council for Interfaith Engagement. I also do athletic training as my major, so I'm kind of all over the place. I've been passionate about interfaith conversation since I started at BYU as a non-LDS student. I think that it's pretty integral to any non-LDS student's experience to be able to talk to people of other faiths. And I found that learning about each other leads to more love and more understanding. One of the greatest misconceptions that I've seen with interfaith conversation is that we believe that we need to agree to get along. And in reality, I think that we can disagree with the way that we see the world, and we can still learn from each other and love each other. This is the final interfaith symposium that I'll have the pleasure of leading here at BYU. And when I was thinking about the topic that I wanted to look at for this symposium, one of the things that came to mind for me was the place of women in religion. And I think that there's so many women, in my experience as someone who comes from a conservative faith tradition, that are actively teaching, leading, and existing as devout members of faith communities, but they don't have formal titles. And for that reason, a lot of the time, we don't platform those women, and we don't end up hearing their experiences. And what I really wanted from this symposium was a chance for women to be able to share their experiences, the education that they have, and the way that they follow their faith traditions, because I just think that that's something that we need more of in our world. I hope that you can leave tonight inspired by all of these panelists, not because they're women, but because they're incredible people of faith, whether they have formal titles or not. So that is my encouragement to you this evening. On your way out, or whenever you have to leave, we do have a table at the back that's asking you to write down the name of a woman of faith that you admire and why. So we would love if you would contribute to that. We will be putting all of the answers on like a board in the Office of Belonging and displaying it in the next couple of weeks, so you can keep an eye out for that. I apologize for having my phone on stage. You will notice we have a QR code up here. You can send your questions starting now to that QR code, and we will be taking your questions. Some of them we will read to our panelists, and they will get to answer. So we would love for you to be able to participate in that way. You can send questions whenever. I don't believe they pop up for you to see like what you've sent, but they have been sent if you click the send button. Now I'm going to introduce all of our panelists, and I would ask that you hold your applause till the end. First up, Chaplain Captain Jenna Carson serves as a chaplain in the United States Air Force. While beginning her ministry training at Harvard, she began petitioning the LDS Church leadership to change policy and allow women to serve as military chaplains. She went on to become the first female military chaplain endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Prior to serving in the Air Force, she worked as a hospital chaplain and a prison chaplain and became the first Latter-day Saint chaplain in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Jenna earned 4 units of clinical pastoral education and is a Kripalu-certified yoga therapist. She co-hosts the spiritual podcast Guiding Light. Captain Carson earned a BA from Brigham Young University and a Master of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School. She is an avid writer, and her forthcoming memoir narrates her experience as a female chaplain in a men's penitentiary. Next up, Maysa Kergaye has been part of the Utah community for the past 32 years. She is a mother of 4 and a grandma to 3 little girls. She taught math at Salt Lake Community College for 15 years and Zumba for the past 14 years. She runs the Islamic Speakers Bureau, is active in interfaith work, helps Syrian and Iraqi refugees, and has volunteered at many different organizations and mosques. She especially loves teaching Sunday school, volunteering at the prison, and speaking with new converts to Islam. Next, we have Kendra Graham. Kendra is a Christian Bible teacher from Asheville, North Carolina. She is currently a labor and delivery nurse in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she has worked since 1998. Kendra led a Christian community Bible study at the Billy Graham Training Center from 2007 until 2024, which was held in person as well as streamed online to thousands of listeners. She also travels around the country and sometimes the world for speaking engagements where she teaches people how to study the Bible. She has a passion for relationship with God as well as respectfully engaging with other faith groups, particularly the Jewish and Messianic Jewish communities. Kendra, together with her husband Will, has 3 grown children. Last, we have Esty Zippel. Esty was born in Israel and moved to New York at a young age. She attended high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and pursued higher-level Judaic education at a seminary in Italy. She graduated with a bachelor's in psychology from the College of Mount St. Vincent in 2021. In 2022, Esty and her husband, Rabbi Chaim, moved to Lehi, Utah, where they launched Chabad of Utah County. As part of her work in the community, Esty directs the Jewish Women's Circle, which brings together Jewish women of all backgrounds to connect, learn, and celebrate their heritage. Esty is also a devoted mother to her 2 children, Emmanuel and Tuvia. Now you can give them all a round of applause. There's some pretty fantastic panelists, right? We're very excited to have them. So our first question tonight is going to be, what is one traditional or historical figure you look up to in your faith and why?
I'm happy to start. So my name's Esty, comes from the name Esther. I quite look up to Queen Esther, it's a very appropriate time because we are celebrating now Purim this coming weekend, next weekend. And she is just an inspiring woman who, took up the baton and, saw that her Jewish people were, going to be executed again. And she took it upon herself to marry a king, and she saved the Jewish people. Her name, Esther, in Hebrew, it means hidden. She was a very modest woman, so taking up this role was a lot for her. And I personally, think that her story is absolutely amazing. And she gave up not just her physical life of marrying a king, but in her mind, she understood that she's giving up her life in the world to come by marrying the king. So, just the fact that she took the whole Jewish people under her wing and protected them, I think that's absolutely incredible, sort of like, what a mother does, comes and takes care of her children. So, yeah, I think she's an absolutely incredible woman.
Well, my name is Kendra Graham, and I'm going to answer tonight as a Christian woman who follows Yeshua, Jesus, as Messiah, and is in relationship with him. So I look up to Jesus, and I love how he interacted with women and how he interacted with mankind. He's a relational God who created relational people, and he entered into the brokenness of our story. And I think of John chapter 4, when Jesus went to Samaria, and he found himself at Jacob's well, and in the middle of the day, there was a Samaritan woman dragging a water jug. There has to be a lot of guilt and shame for a woman to bring a water jug in the middle of the day. to fill it up with water. And Jesus asked her if he could have a drink. And she was like, I'm sorry, I'm a Samaritan. You see, most of the Jerusalem, Israel, they would circumvent Samaria. Samaritans were Jewish, but they had a mixed bloodline of Babylonian, Medes, and Persians. And so, also, she was a woman. And she was like, I should be invisible. And Jesus said, if you knew who was asking you for a drink, you would ask him for Mayim Chayim, the living water. And she was like, living water, so I don't have to come back here every day in the middle of the day? Yes, please and thank you. And she could just live her life in isolation. But Jesus, relational, engaging this woman in her story, he said, bring back your husband. And she said, I don't have a husband. And he said, you speak truth. You not only don't have a husband, you've had 5. And the one you're living with is not currently your husband. And she was like, are you a prophet? And he said, I am Messiah, very clearly. And so here is Jesus engaging in a woman who had a past full of guilt and shame and brokenness. He highlights the brokenness not to humiliate her, but to heal her. And that is incredible because nobody is out of the reach of God. And so he is offering her redemption, and she's overwhelmed. She leaves her water jug. She runs to the town. She tells the elders, I think the Messiah's at the well, and you don't want to miss him. If he offered the living water to me, if he offered redemption to me, if he offered forgiveness to someone like me, then everyone is welcome to have it. And so that is just proof of a woman who's been set free. That's who Jesus is. He comes into our stories and he sets us free. And I want to know a God who loves us enough to come himself to set us free.
Wow. I don't know what's the right answer, but if you would ask any Muslim who do they look up to, usually the answer is Prophet Muhammad. And I didn't want to take the typical answer today, so I tried to choose a female. So I picked one of his wives, Khadija. She was older than him. She proposed to him. She was his boss. He worked for her as a merchant. And because of his honesty, she proposed to him, and they got married and had 6 children. But just everything about her strength, of how she handled herself, how she ran the business, inspires me.
I love so many Marys, and I'm thinking now of Mary Magdalene. In some traditions, she's called the first apostle of Jesus. She was by his side, and we don't know so much about her, but we know that she was there with Jesus again and again, and that's where I want to be. And I also love that she witnessed his resurrection, so it's really special to me to think about Mary.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing. The next question I'll ask is, how does your faith tradition view the role of women, and how do you personally interpret or navigate those teachings? It's kind of a heavy one.
Okay, I'll start this time. First, that women and men are considered equal in the sight of God, whether in terms of worship or spirit or their roles of trying to please God, whether through prayer, fasting, charity, they're equal. But they have different roles. And I'd hate to even specify a role for women because everybody's different. So our role in life is to worship God and make it to heaven. But if I was to put a role, I would say motherhood. But I, again, would hate to use just that role because some people don't get the chance to become mothers. But that is a role that is put on a pedestal, so to speak. We say heaven lies at the feet of mothers. And it is really looked up to, so that if you are a stay-at-home mom, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But I know in this society, we feel the need to compete all the time and prove our worth by what degree we have or what job we have. I know I fell into that too, but after I stayed home and my kids entered school. But I appreciate my husband. I remember he would come home and I'd sometimes be in tears, and he's like, "What gives?" I'm like, "There's nothing to show for what I did today." And he's like, "Yeah, but we will see the results many years from now." And sure enough, we have wonderful kids, and I appreciated being able to stay home.
So Judaism is a home-based religion. So we have our synagogues where we keep, the Torah, and where, we pray, but we could also pray at home. But it's a home-based religion in regards to, we believe that our children are the future, which they are, and we need to really work and put all our effort into them, and that is our job as a woman. It's my job. Things like, I'm saying because it is a home-based religion, things like kosher is in the home, Shabbat is in the home, family purity is all in the home, the three basics of Judaism. And in Judaism, the woman is the foundation of the home. She decides how her house is run. She decides how her children are raised. So in a sense, the whole Jewish religion lies on the woman's shoulder. She decides how her home will develop. And because one of my main goals, is to grow in my Judaism, I'm doing that every day. I'm making sure everything is tidy so everyone has a tidy mind as well. So that's just my role as a Jewish woman, as a Jewish wife, as a Jewish mother, that fulfills my everyday desires.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a Christian woman, in relationship with Yeshua, Jesus Messiah, who I believe to be Emmanuel, with us God, I look to the Bible for my answers. And so the Bible being defined as Old Testament through New Testament, Genesis through Revelation. So how does Jesus interact with women? Does he? What role does he say women have? So I look to him. And, I can't remember a time when Jesus ever put a role on anyone. I think what he did was he healed the brokenhearted, set the captive free. I think that what he did was, especially with women, he restored strength, dignity, and worth by listening to their stories, by healing them, by understanding where they're coming from. I think of what Jenna said, Mary Magdalene in Luke 8, when Jesus healed her from the evil spirits. He restored her strength, dignity, and worth. I think of Mark chapter 5, the woman with the issue of blood for 12 years. Here she is hemorrhaging for 12 years. She goes into a crowd, and she reaches for all she's worth to the tip of the tassel of Jesus' robe that he's walking through the crowd, and she's immediately healed. Jesus stops everything until he finds her. And I love this part in Mark chapter 5. It says he listened to her whole story, not just the story of the present moment, but her whole story. And Matthew 15, of the Canaanite woman, I like this one too because she begs Jesus, begs him to heal her daughter. And he does, and he says, "Lady, you have great faith." And I really like the Canaanite woman because she is... she's Goy, she's Gentile, she's not Jewish. Jesus came for his people, Israel, and his love extends to the nations. What kind of God is that? That's so incredible to me, that his love is for his people and extends to the nations, and I'm part of that. And Jesus restoring strength, dignity, and worth to even a Goy woman, and I am a woman who Jesus has engaged with her story. So I'm just overwhelmed with humility and gratefulness that his love extends all the way that far.
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think women's role traces back to Mother Eve. So this is one thing I really love about my personal theological tradition, is that we believe Eve was really inspired and a very discerning, wise woman. And so I love to look to that heritage and believe that she foresaw certain things and the need for humanity to have this experience on earth, which I respect very much. I know this is very distinct from other Christian traditions, and I respect that. But it's interesting because my church, some of us here who are LDS, our church is pretty new, only a few hundred years. And I think we're still trying to define the role of women. I think one word we use a lot is nurturer. So like when some of you were sharing about your experience being a mother, and maybe you don't see those results right away, but you're creating this home for little ones to feel God's love. Like, I think that's incredible. And I'm not a mother, but I do believe, like, I'm not a biological mom, but I believe my work is mothering. Like, I'm gathering people and sharing God's love. And so I think there's so many ways to mother. And I love what you said about how, well, a few of you said this, like, there's not necessarily a role, like we shouldn't put women in a box and say, this is what you do, or this is what the church says that you should do. So I'm grateful that, like, this idea of a role, I think, is expanding in my church and can be seen in so many ways. And so I celebrate everyone here, whatever you're feeling God calling you to do. I think that's your role. So, yeah.
That's great.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Do you want to use a handheld?
Okay, you're on. You're on. Maybe not.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, cool. That segues well into our next question, which is, what opportunities exist for women in leadership in your tradition, and how have you seen those evolve over time, if they have evolved?
Okay, I'll go first. Get it over with. As a follower of Jesus, in relationship with him, I really look to the Bible. Did he have any women in leadership? And he actually did. Like Jenna said again, Eve, right? We've got in Exodus, we have Miriam. In Judges, we've got Deborah, Jael, we've got Queen Esther. We have in the New Testament, we have Mary of Bethany, we have Martha, we have Phoebe, we have Priscilla, we have in 2 John, the female chosen lady pastor. Yes, like God has put a lot of women in leadership, so I don't have to worry about being in leadership. If Yeshua wants me in leadership, I'll be in leadership. If he wants me on a stage, he'll put me on a stage. It's all up to him. And as for evolving, I feel like it's always been there. God has always placed women in leadership. So maybe, if anything, we're devolving, if I'm being honest, just with culture and all the things going on. But again, it's not something I, as a follower of Jesus as Messiah, even worry about, because he's the creator of heaven and earth. He's the King of all kings. He's the God of all gods. And I think he can kind of go over any system that's in place. If he wants us there, he'll place us there. So it's not about title.
Is it? Okay. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, whom my husband and I are emissaries of, he wanted to spread Judaism throughout the world and to bring it to all Jews in every corner of the world, which is what my husband and I are out here in Utah, where there's not many Jews. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe specifically he didn't want a rabbi to go to a place. He wanted a couple to go to a place. And he didn't want the husband to direct. He didn't want the husband to direct the Chabad, the institution. He wanted them to both co-direct because he was very pro-woman having a place in leadership. In all Jewish communities, there are many women in leadership. And, I don't think we had to come a long way. There's also in our history, for example, there's Devorah, the prophetess, who was the fourth judge after Yehoshua. And she was also a general when she realized that nobody else was taking that position. So when she needed to fill it and she saw nobody was doing it, she came up to the stand. So I think that there are many roles for Jewish women to take leadership.
In Islam, women can take roles of leadership. We don't have hierarchy, so there's no bishops and priests and everything. We have what we call the imam, and the imam is the person who leads the prayer. So women can lead prayer, but usually for other women. Have any of you seen our prayers? They're kind of stand, bow, prostrate. So when you prostrate, it's kind of not the best position to have a woman in front of men. So women don't tend to lead men in prayer. But again, this is just a role of leading prayer. It's not something ordained or you have to achieve, you just do it. But women can hold any office, whether political or judgeship, but really I think the biggest place and role still is motherhood. This is where you can make the biggest difference in the world. Or a teacher, since many of us are teachers as well. But I think the only limits that are set upon us are the ones you allow them to be set on you. So if somebody tells me no, I just kind of nod at them and go do whatever I want regardless. So I will share a crazy story that happened to me. The first day I arrived in Utah, I went to a picnic. And at that picnic, it was an MSA picnic, so it's a Muslim Student Association picnic from the UFU. And they were having election for president, vice president, secretary, all of the different positions for the MSA. And I met the guy who's in charge, and I said, oh, I was the MSA president in Virginia. He goes, really? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, I'm putting your name in the hat. I'm like, nobody knows me here. He goes, I'm putting your name in the hat. I'm like, okay. Lo and behold, I get elected vice president for the MSA. And airing a little bit of dirty laundry here, the guy who was elected for president kind of looked at me and said, we have a problem. I said, why? He goes, well, I got elected president, but I don't want the position, but I don't believe a woman can be the president. And I kind of looked at him, I said, interesting, well, then you're in a dilemma. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what ended up happening with him, honestly, but I figured, I don't need to deal with this drama. So I started another club and became the president and ran that club.
Love it. Well, this is a complicated question, especially since I'm at BYU. So with respect, and I think we can say this is a fact, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's a very clear hierarchy, and the men who are ordained in our church have the lion's share of institutional power and leadership roles. And that is something that's interesting to me, and I really struggle with personally, and not every woman in the church will share that struggle with me, and I respect that and honor that. Women do lead in our church a lot in those ways, like you said, where we don't necessarily have a title. And some women have titles, Relief Society president and primary president and counselors and things. But there is this very strong distinction between what men do in the church and what women do. And what is interesting right now and really expanding is that the church is opening more and more endorsement for women to serve in chaplaincy, so to follow a vocation, a calling from God, to serve in interfaith settings. And so in the military, for example, where I work as a chaplain, I lead Christian worship services on Sunday. So I, in that capacity, will serve communion and be preaching, and it's for a wide Protestant audience. And I had that as well in the Federal Bureau of Prison, because in the government in this country, Latter-day Saints are umbrellaed. We're considered officially Protestant, and I respect that we have theological differences, and some people will be abhorred to hear this. But when I preach, I focus on the common ground, Jesus, and the Old and New Testament, and I stick to those very clearly. But it's so interesting as a Latter-day Saint woman to have institutional power and calling and leadership outside my church, and also to be a faithful member of my church, and to love the church, and to sustain my leaders, and to appreciate the structure and appreciate what the ordained men do. And so I'm really navigating this interesting space, and I'm grateful, and I'm looking forward to this ongoing evolving of how we see how women and men can work together in the institution.
Thank you all. That's great answers to all of those questions. Our next question is from the audience, and it is, are there moments in your life where you have felt your voice can make a difference to help open up opportunities for other women within your tradition?
Yes. So in 2015, I felt God calling me. That's a lot of you know that term, right? You feel guided by God to do something. You must answer the call. I felt God guiding me to become a military chaplain. But at the time, our church did not endorse women to do that because we're not ordained. And so it took about 7 years, but I finally got the endorsement. And I realized in that I can be an advocate. And when God calls me to do something, there is nothing that I can't do and that we can't do. Like, we can always do what God calls us to do. And so I feel like I was able, in my small way, to help open doors. And any work I did built on the work of other women who came before. And it's like the struggle of my life, like a little bit of discontent and working for change, and also like loving where women are and the sisterhood that I have in the church. And so thank you all, everyone who is working for appropriate change for women where needed. Yeah.
So I run the Islamic Speakers Bureau, among many other things, and so I feel I have to always explain to people what Islam really says and clear misconceptions. And you would think I would only have to do that for non-Muslims, but apparently I have to do that for Muslims as well, and specifically converts, because they usually, not usually, but sometimes are married to Muslim men, and so they're teaching them their brand of Islam with cultural baggage, and I'm like, okay, that's not true, that's not right. And so we try to make sure people know what Islam is, and that there really is no limitations. So whether I teach Zumba and tell them, yes, you can do that, and yes, you can do many other things, or go in the prison. So I've volunteered at the prison for 10 years. So just different roles, you just have to find the courage to do it and be as a role model for others, and hopefully encourage them to do what they want to do as well.
Well, as a Christian woman in relationship with Yeshua, with Jesus, I believe that God created each and every one of us on purpose, for purpose. He's a relational God who made relational beings. We were created to walk with God, to know God, and to need God. And He has entrusted each and every one of us. He made us on purpose, for purpose. And each and every one of us has a story. And a lot of us don't have a story that we wanted to have, but we have a story that's been entrusted to us. And God wants to engage us in that story. And that's why he came personally in the form of a man. His name is Jesus. He came personally so that, see, God is holy and we are not holy. So he had to bridge the gap with himself because he can't trust us to anyone else. And so he did. He bridged that gap. And he came. He lived a holy life, a perfect life. And I love how Isaiah 53 puts it. He was a man who experienced all of our sickness and our illnesses. He wiped his nose when he got sick. And then Isaiah 53, 4 through 6, he lived a holy life. See, only holiness can cover unholiness. Unrighteousness can't fix unrighteousness. Only righteousness can fix it. And so he was righteous. And so he died on the cross. In Isaiah 53, 7 through 9, it talks about how he was counted as wicked. And then he was buried in the tomb of a rich man. And he was Joseph of Arimathea from the Sanhedrin. He was buried in a rich man's tomb. And then he rose again. All of that, God himself experienced all of that, because that is how precious your story matters to God himself. And he went through great lengths so that you could trust him with your story, so he could restore your strength and dignity and worth. Your story matters, male or female, but it matters. And when you're in relationship with Jesus, he gives you the courage to speak that to who you need to speak it to, whether it be your kids or coaching a soccer team or teaching a class. Your story has impact when Jesus, the Messiah, comes into it and gives you purpose. Because then you get to walk with God and know God, because you're created to need God, and you can do all that through Yeshua, Jesus, Messiah. Thanks.
So I don't have many years under my belt. I haven't been in many positions to empower many women, but I like to believe that it's the small things. I have a bat mitzvah club for young girls between the ages of 11 and 13, which is 12 is the age in Judaism where you reach adulthood. And it's just a small club where Jewish girls could get together and, hang out with people of their own faith and learn to be proud of their Judaism and not be nervous or afraid that they'll be judged for who they are. So I like to think that I empower them to be proud of who they are.
This next question is specifically for Jenna, but we can also ask to the rest of you if you feel like it applies to you. Feel free to answer. If you have worked in a male-dominated field, which Jenna does with the military, how have you found your religion to be a strength as a woman in that environment?
Well, I love receiving laying on of hands blessings, which is a tradition in my church, and I'd love to hear more about blessings in your traditions. So I've worked in a men's prison, which is very male-dominated, and now the military. And I really, when I need extra strength, I pray all the time. I'm always clinging to God. I need that. I need God all the time. And I often ask for a laying on of hands blessing from a leader in my church. So I've turned to my bishops. I've been blessed with amazing bishops, and they give me very powerful blessings, blessings of protection, blessings of insight, and I also draw so much strength from attending our temples and feeling like remembering promises I made in the temple and feeling like God shields me, God has endowed me with protection. And so I really just keep turning to those promises. And then also remembering that God's Spirit will never ever forsake us. I'm never alone. And that goes for all of us regardless of gender, right? So, yeah.
Anyone else interested in answering that one? No? Okay. Our next question is, how have scriptural texts empowered you as a woman?
we have many in Judaism, but there is one specific one called the Estes Zippel, which was written by King Solomon, that's all about a Jewish woman, her courage, how amazing she is, how she's able to laugh through hard times, through good times, the beauty of a Jewish woman. And there's a lot of depth and a lot of explanations that go through that, and you could like spend over a year studying it, and it's absolutely incredible. It just focuses on a woman, and it's really all the information I need to feel good as a Jewish woman, feel proud as a Jewish woman.
As a woman in relationship with Jesus, the Bible is everything. God's word is everything. That's the authority. That's, we are created to walk with God, created to know God, created to need God. And what a privilege it is to be able to open his word every day and learn more about who he is. And I believe God has given us each a unique identity, right? He's created us on purpose for purpose. And so as I study who God is, he shows me who I am, who he sees me, how he sees me as I learn about him. And he sees me in fullness. He knows me completely. And just the opportunity to get to know him. So I think that it's just such a privilege to be able to have a relationship with the creator of the heavens and the earth, and yet he cares enough about me personally and my identity and who he created me to be, that it's just a journey. It's a day-by-day journey, and it's focused on who God says he is in his word.
I've literally slept with sacred texts next to me. Like when I've been really lonely and afraid in my life, I've brought a scripture, like set it next to me, or literally like on my heart. Not because I think there's some magic that's going to happen, but to remind me that God's word shields me. And I have had sacred experiences with many scriptural texts. The Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita. I have felt God speaking to me through many, many people who have sought God throughout the history of humanity. And one way I really draw strength is remembering that all these prophets, whether it's Moses or I don't think we would call Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita a prophet, but someone, maybe we would, forgive me if I'm wrong, but someone called of God to fill out a dharma, a calling, or Muhammad. All of these individuals were flawed, and forgive me, I probably shouldn't say that Muhammad is flawed.
It's human.
God works through all of us, all the time. And, Moses killed a man. And so when I'm feeling down on myself, like you're just not good enough or you just can't do it, I remember this is the story of God's redemption, is calling us again and again and again, again and again and again. I had a great teacher of the Hebrew Bible in divinity school. He said that's the story of the Hebrew Bible, is constant calling back. Israel is beloved by God. Like, there's nothing Israel or one individual could do to make God turn away. And so that's where I draw strength, because I'm like, you know what? I am so flawed every day, and so were all these other enlightened men and women. So, yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is, what advice would you give to other women of faith who may be struggling with their religious identity in today's world?
Okay, well, identity is a really, really big deal, And if you don't know why God created you, and you don't know your identity and who he has called you to be, then you're going to be, kind of tossed to and fro, whether it be by doctrine or tradition or denomination or Instagram or Twitter. That is going to define you. And that is such a shame, because God, he formed you in your mother's womb. Psalm 139. He has a plan for you. Jeremiah chapter 1. Like, he's called you out specifically. He's not surprised by you being here, Identity. I think, I'm remembering there's 1 Samuel chapter 17. I think you know the story, David and Goliath. I think this really shows identity really well. David shows up to a military campaign. He's like, 16, 17 years old. And he sees Goliath, and Goliath is threatening to destroy Israel. And so David's like, oh, but we serve the living God, so I don't know what the problem is. You see, David knew who he was. Who is David? David is a shepherd. He was a little lad, and he was watching the sheep. He is also a poet. See, while he was watching the sheep in that field, he was learning about who God was and who he is to God. So if you've read the Psalms, then you know that David knew who God was. You're created to walk with God, created to know God, created to need God, and David did. As a poet, he wrote about it. David was also a warrior. He protected those sheep from bears and lions. And David's also a king. He was anointed as king around 10 years old. Now, he's not king here with Goliath. Saul is king. But David is a shepherd, poet, warrior, king. That is his identity. And he is strong in that. But he goes and he tells his brothers, he brings them some food, and his brothers are like, hello, you are just a shepherd boy. Part of his identity, but not the entire thing. He goes to Saul, and Saul's like, oh, here's my armor, here's my big sword. Go and warrior Goliath, the way that we warrior traditionally. And David's like, I am a warrior, but I'm not that kind of warrior. He was very confident in the kind of warrior that God had created him to be, and he's not that kind. But he is a shepherd, he's a poet, he's a warrior, and he's a king. And then Goliath, right? Goliath is like mocking David, but we expect mockery from the enemy, right? But you don't expect the people on your side to try to steal your identity that God has given you, and that is hard. That is very hard. But see, David knew who he was because he knew who God was. So David runs to the battle, and we know the rest of the story. David, he is a shepherd, poet, warrior, king. You see, he couldn't be bullied away from his identity that God had given him. He wasn't arrogant when he went out to dispatch Goliath. He was confident in who God was, and he was confident in who God made him to be. So I asked God, I was like, you know what? If you made David to be a shepherd, poet, warrior, king, what did you make me to be? And I remember Jeremiah 29:13. If you seek me with your whole heart, you will find me. I sought the answer to that because identity is a big deal. And so it took about 6 months to a year, but God was very clear about who he created me to be because that's who he is. He doesn't try to hide himself from us. He's a God of invitation, a God of a desire, and a God of relationship. And so identity, know who God created you to be. How do you find your identity? By knowing who God is, first and foremost.
Thank you. I'm a little puzzled by the question for my perspective, but I would say if someone is really struggling, I'd say pray. Ask God for guidance to help you see the truth and the path that you need. I would share with teenagers usually a prayer. It's a prayer you would say when you would look in the mirror. It says, I like it in Arabic just because it rhymes, but Allahumma kama hassanta khalqi fahassin khuluqi. You just change a few vowels on the word and it has a whole different meaning. But it says, oh God, as you have perfected my creation, perfect my manners. And I like teaching this to teenagers because they need to love who they are and realize they're created perfectly the way they are. So if we can love ourselves from inside and out and accept some of the trials we get in life and to just have gratitude for what we do have in our life, then hopefully we wouldn't have any of the struggles.
What I like to go back to always is a sentence that the day you were born is the day that God decided the world cannot continue without you. So continue to exist without you. So, if you're struggling with your place in this world, just, remember that. And also, don't be afraid to ask questions and surround yourself with people who will be willing to answer you. And try to cleave to people who you admire. You see a person and you think, I want to be like them. Ask them to be your mentor. If you see a mother and you see how amazing her children have been raised, ask her questions. Ask her to mentor you. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was also very insistent that every Jew, every person should have a mentor, so they always have someone to turn to when they're struggling with something or have any questions, just someone to help them set things straight.
When I think of this question, I feel called to respond to people who are asking if you should stay in a church or change churches, because I've asked that a lot, and I feel God calling me to stay in my church, and I've also made covenants that have to do with my membership in the church, so I take those very seriously. What God has taught me as I've prayed about this, because I can promise you that over many years, like 7 years now, I've been asking if I should leave my church. And primarily it was because I felt a call from God that I wasn't able to do through my church for quite some time in my ministry. God has told me to stay, and what I learned is that my fidelity above all is to God. And institution is important. Institution gives us community in some of our religious traditions. It gives us covenants. It gives us, in some of our traditions, connection to priesthood, office, and power. And there's goodness in institution, but institution doesn't love us. It's God who loves us. Institution has to operate by flawed humans, right? All of us. God is perfect and infinitely perfect. And so I've learned to really prize, as you've talked about, the direct connection with God. And to trust that as long as I keep that alignment with God, everything else will fall into place. And God does not let faithful servants go very far down the wrong path without turning us right around. I had a mentor, Dr. David Holland, at Harvard. He told me that when I was agonizing over what profession to choose in my life. This is before I got down the chaplaincy road. He said, Jenna, he didn't say this, but I'm summarizing. He said, you're too worried about this because God is not going to let you go too far down the wrong path. God's going to turn you around. And that's my testimony for whoever's struggling with identity. Because as Kendra said, the identity is God's beloved.
That's awesome. Thank you. Our next question is from the audience as well, and they're wondering if you guys could each talk about one woman who has influenced your faith journey.
One woman what?
Who has influenced your faith journey and your religion.
I don't know.
I'll say Tammy Harris. So I don't know if maybe none of you have heard of Tammy Harris. She currently works at the LDS Church headquarters, and she helps endorse Latter-day Saint chaplains to do what we do in the world. So you know how when you came to BYU, you had to get ecclesiastical endorsement? Well, chaplains have to as well before we go to work. Whether we're a rabbi or LDS or an imam, like we have to get endorsement from our religious body. And so what Tammy did in 1989, before women were ever officially allowed to be chaplains in the LDS Church, she just started doing it without asking permission. And after several years, she had a meeting with with Elder Jeff Holland, who in the LDS Church is like a big deal. He's a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And she said, do you know what I've been doing? And he goes, oh, Tammy, we've known about you for years, and we love what you're doing. Keep doing it. And so, she didn't get a lot of attention. Like, I got attention because I made the stride in the military, but long before me, there was Tammy Harris in 1989 working with kids who had severe mental health challenges, and I bless her for paving the way and just give thanks to God.
I mean, my mother, she raised me in this way. And she was very encouraging that if I wanted to go check other things out and explore, she was quite encouraging. When I wanted to switch schools, she helped me out with that. So, I mean, I think, yeah, like when I was 19, I ended up being my decision, but she was like, do you want to start dating, get married? So yeah, that happened. But that really did shape my Judaism and the way I live today.
I'm going to take it. You're going to laugh at my answer, though. It's not a woman. It's my husband. He's always been there for me, supporting any decision, crazy thing I want to do, helping at home, just really influenced my whole life. If I married a different guy who wasn't as supportive, I don't think I would have achieved a quarter of what I've achieved in my life.
Well, I have to say, recently in my studies, it's the chosen lady of 2 John. I didn't really know she existed until the last year. And my rabbi friend, Rabbi Yaakov ben Yehoshua, he told me, you need to study her. Because every time I would get up to speak, I would kind of apologize or minimize myself or just not be confident. I shouldn't be here. And he just really encouraged me to study her. And I studied her, and she's incredible. She was a pastor. She was a discipler. She discipled kids and men and women everywhere she went. Every breath was ministry, whoever was in front of her. And the people that she taught and she discipled ended up going to visit John in Ephesus one day, and he was like, whoa, who influenced your life? You guys are on fire. You guys are right on. And they said, this lady, I wished I knew her name. But I have actually, in the last year, garnered a lot of strength from her, just encouragement. Again, that God has always placed women in leadership. And even though we don't know her name, she's actually one of my heroes. So now.
Thank you all for sharing. For those of you, I know we're hitting the top of the hour. For those of you that have to leave, please fill out the question in the back to participate in our activity. We understand some of you do have to leave, but we'll ask a couple more questions. We'll probably go about 15 more minutes. So if you can stay, we would really appreciate it. But again, we understand some of you are up against deadlines and probably homework due at midnight.
We wish you the best. We'll say a prayer right now in our hearts for you. That time of semester, when you feel like the whole world is going to end, at least I did. I was like, ah.
Yes, we understand. And this will be recorded, so if you need to go back and watch it, feel free. Our next question is, have you faced any challenges or misconceptions about your role as a woman within your religion, and how have you addressed them if you have?
Oh, this one is hard for me because, yes, I have had a lot of misconceptions about what women can do and about what women can't do. And I can say it's because of doctrine, denomination, even family, church family, theology. But if I got to the root of it, it's not a misconception about that. It's a misconception about who God is. I have had misconceptions about who God is, and there was a specific time that I had truly a misconception about who God is, and that was when my kids were little. I had a 9-month-old and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I thought I was extremely insignificant. I don't know if you've ever felt like you've fallen through the cracks of God's mind, like you just didn't matter. Yeah, that was me. My husband, Will Graham, he felt called by God to go and help his father, Franklin Graham. And so we moved 4 miles from where all my support system was. And that was actually really devastating for me as a young mom. My husband was kind of thrust out on a worldwide stage where he was going all over the world, and here I was at home in an oldie-moldy home with young kids who are sick a lot, with a car that broke down a lot, and I had some serious questions about God, about who he was and who I was to him. I don't know if you've ever heard of like BOGO, buy one, get one, but yeah, like buy one, the one you want, get one, the one on the sale table, which you might not need. You can maybe get a couple bucks on eBay, you know. My husband was the BOGO. He was the BO, buy one. Like, he was really important. He's a great preacher. God really needed him. And then the get one, well, me and my 3 kids, we're just part of the package, you know. And that was really hard. I felt really insignificant. Being part of the Graham family is actually a really big deal in Christian evangelical circles. I don't know if you know that, but Billy Graham's a really big deal in our Christian evangelical circles. So, so as a Christian in my church, they would say, find a verse in Scripture and you claim it, you know, until you're through. You see, I was in a deep depression. Oh, man, it was dark. And despair kind of threatened my life on more than one day. It was a hard space. So find a scripture that you can hold on to, right? That's what you're supposed to do. So that's what I'm going to do, because I am a Graham, and, you know, that's what I'm told to do in church. So I searched the Bible, and I found one, Isaiah 49:14. Adonai has forsaken me, Adonai has forgotten me. Yes. There you go. There's your verse, is pretty much what I was telling people in church. Could I have found a more chipper verse? Yeah. But I couldn't have found a more honest verse, right? So Jeremiah 29:13, God says, seek me with your whole heart and you'll find me. I was like, okay, I'm going to start seeking you because I have some serious questions about who you are and who I am to you. So God took me through Exodus, and I started studying Exodus word by word, verse by verse, line by line. And I get to Exodus chapter 17. In Exodus 17, see, God had delivered Israel from Egypt, Mitzrayim, double misery on his own, by his own hand. He brought them through the wilderness. Where were they going following a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud? They were going to Sinai. Why were they going to Sinai? Because that is where the presence of the living God was, and he did not want to be away from his people one more moment. So he delivered them, and he was driving them to himself, because that's who God is. So they get 9/10 of the way to, and we're in Exodus 17, to a place called Rephidim. Rephidim is historically known as a place of oasis, water, figs, and palms. Well, when they get there, there is no water. Figures. That's what I was saying. And the people were awfully mad, and they were upset with God. Who do you think you are? Here you're just trying to kill us and our kids and our livestock. And I'm like, absolutely. That's exactly what he's trying to do. Not cool. And so Moses is like, they want to kill me. God, what should I do? And God is like, Moses, your 80-year-old bones, I want you to keep coming to Sinai, come into my presence, bring your staff, because you're going to hit a rock from the heart of the presence of the living God. And when you hit that rock, water is going to flow from Sinai all the way to Rephidim, and it will water my people. You see, the people of Israel had a misconception about who God was. They didn't know his name, or maybe they had forgotten it. I had a misconception about who God was. Maybe I never knew his name. Maybe I'd forgotten it. I didn't know. But he was teaching me, as he was teaching his people in the desert, what his name was. You see, Matthew 7:13, Jesus stands up on the last day of Sukkot, and he says, anyone who is thirsty, come to me, and from you rivers of living water, Mayim Kayim, will flow. And so, you see, it's not about the water, actually. It's about the source of the water. It's not about the provision, it's about the provider. And I had it all wrong. And so I didn't know. I didn't know that I didn't know he's deliverer until I needed to be delivered. I didn't know his name was Rapha until I needed healing. I didn't know his name was Shepherd until I was completely lost. I didn't know that his name was bread of life until I was hungry. I didn't know he was a living water until my soul had such a deep thirst not for the provision, but for the provider. Jesus said, come to me, not come to denomination. Come to me, not come to tradition. Come to me, not come to your programs. Come to me, not come to roles. Come to me, not come to your rules. Come to me. In God's word, that's who he is. You see, I had a misconception about who God was. And he loved me enough to teach me who he is, what his name is. Those were hard times. And had I just gone on from Isaiah 49:14, 15, and 16, says he inscribes your name on his palms, in front of your eyes, in front of his eyes, in front of his heart, not on the bottom of his shoe to squash you like a bug. If I had read Deuteronomy 31:3, or if I had read Hebrews 13:5, I would have known that he doesn't forget or forsake. And again, a God whose love extends from his people all the way to the nations is humbling. He loved me enough to teach me his name. So misconceptions, absolutely, but he is a God that if you seek him, you will find him. It's his promise, it's who he is, and he will never turn his back on his name.
A common misconception as a Jewish woman is that we are oppressed, that as a married woman, I have to cover my hair, my elbows, my knees. I can't go to the beach in a swimsuit, and that we are just baby-making machines. These are just things I've heard that people think of us. And first of all, it's my choice, and I dress modestly as respect to myself and as respect to my husband. I mean, if you met my kids, you'll see why we'd want like tons of kids. But but actually, the other day I walked out of Sam's Club, and this guy was, raising money for something. I don't remember, for children, something. And he went to shake my hand. I said, I'm so sorry, I don't shake hands for religious purposes. And so he tried to give me a fist bump. And I was like, oh, no, not that either. And then he tried doing like the elbow bump. And I was like, no, not that. Like, I was like, just nothing. And he's like, oh, okay. And then throughout the conversation, he's like, oh, yeah, and goes in for a high five. And I'm like, come on. But that is something that I choose to do, that I do out of, for myself, for my husband, for my kids, my religion. It's just part of my religion, and it's just something I keep strong. And other people's misconceptions about me and my religion isn't going to define how I live my life and how I keep my religion. So, I mean, misconceptions typically is just a lack of education. So it's not their fault. It's not my fault. It's okay if people don't understand. And the more they misconcept, the more they ask questions, the more they learn. So that's okay.
Go ahead.
You're lucky. When I told a guy I don't shake hands, he goes, no problem, and he gave me a big hug.
Oh.
I said,
That's happened to me as well.
Oh, no. Let's go back to shaking hands. But yes, when you see a Muslim woman, I tell people, unless a hand is extended, don't extend a hand, because sometimes I know some ladies will not stay within their tradition to not insult you, and they will shake hands. I usually don't. I'll say, sorry, I don't shake hands. But yeah, that was like above and beyond what, anyway. Islam has definitely a lot of misconceptions in the US, but it's getting less and less, hopefully, with more internet availability, but there's also a lot of fake news and fake information out there. So I find the best way is to have good Muslim friends or neighbors that you will feel not shy to ask them some questions. I know in my neighborhood, I've been in there 32 years in the same house, but 10 years after being in the same house, the Relief Society decided to do a Q&A since I run the Speakers Bureau, and for me to do my spiel. Oh my God, I got asked over 100 questions, if not more. And I'm like, we do everything together. We go hiking together. We do everything together. How come you don't ask me questions? They're like, we don't want to be rude. I'm like, no, please ask. So so much, I don't know where to go. In my Zumba class, one of the ladies had a birthday party, and she invited me, and there was all women. So I felt comfortable enough to take my scarf off, and she just looked at me, and she goes, "You're not bald." I'm like, "No, I'm not bald." She goes, "I thought you had cancer." I said, "No, I don't have cancer." So again, people have assumptions on so many things just because they don't want to ask. So my advice to you is ask questions. It's okay. We're used to it.
Thank you. You reminded me, Esty, about this cartoon I saw years ago, and I don't remember the exact captions or the exact illustrations, but there were two women. There's a woman in a bikini and a Muslim woman, fully modest, wearing hijab. And the thoughts of the woman in the bikini looking at the Muslim woman are, she's so oppressed. Look at how covered she is. And the Muslim woman is thinking, she's so oppressed. Look how naked she is. And so I just was reminded of that, how sometimes we just don't understand each other. And so panels like this are so needed. Thank you. We're not oppressed. We chose our practices, right, with intention and purpose. As far as women misunderstood in my tradition, I'm just thinking of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and which I did start watching, and I was like, wow, that was just wow, And, I respect those women because they're owning their own identity in this culture. I respect that. It's very different than how I choose to live out my faith. But I think oftentimes people think of, the Book of Mormon musical and Secret Lives of Mormon Women and all the documentaries about the plural wives and different things. And I have an ache inside that's how women are portrayed a lot, and not just LDS women, but many religious women were portrayed as people who aren't using their critical thinking and who aren't choosing lives of purpose. And so I am aware of that, but also people who actually know members of any of our faiths, they know who we really are. And I just have hope that, like you said, with the internet and more knowledge, hopefully everyone will become a little more tolerant and remember that there's so many kinds of Mormons, there's so many kinds of Muslims, so many kinds of evangelical Christians, so many kinds of Jews, and we are all just doing our best.
That's very true. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to have one more question for you guys. And that's going to be, what is one of the most fulfilling aspects of being a woman in your faith tradition?
I'm going to answer it a little differently because I think when I read the question, I read it differently. I took it, what aspect of your faith, not of being a woman. So I chose the scarf. Mm-hmm. To me, some Muslim women feel awkward to be so visible in the public sphere. And it is sometimes, but I'm an extreme extrovert, so I don't have a problem with it. And to not have to worry about, at least for me, the scarf makes me not have to worry about fulfilling what is beautiful. It takes me 10 seconds to get ready in the morning. Saves me a lot of money on beauty products and all kinds of products. I remember in high school, I didn't wear a scarf in high school, and so I would wake up an hour early to wet my hair and blow dry it upside down and God knows what else to get the perfect look and put the makeup on and all that. So I've done it, been there, done that, and realized, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. No bad haircuts, no bad hair dye jobs or lack of a hair dye job, and having gray hair and aging gracefully and accepting how you're aging and how God made you and loving yourself. That's what I get about wearing a scarf, let alone people do tend to be more respectful for the majority. I mean, you have a crazy person every now and then, but I remember in college I had a job at Kinko's, if you know what that is. It doesn't exist anymore. But the minute I'd be in a room and the teenagers walk in who work there, they'd be saying a dirty joke, and then they see me and they just go quiet. And people tend to open doors more and be very respectful, so there's perks.
Well, as a woman in relationship with Jesus, the most fulfilling part is relationship. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and that's overwhelming. Again, it's a relational God who created relational beings, and he went out of his way to come himself so that we could walk with him, know him, because we were created to need him. And my definition of love, so love the Lord your God, my definition of love is a cultivated and nurtured relationship between two entities. It has to go both ways. So God came to us, he loved us first. And so when we turn to him and we start that walk and we start to learn about who he is, and he fixes our misconceptions, and we learn about his character, and we learn to love God, right? Cultivate and nurture relationship with the living God through Yeshua, Jesus, who is the Messiah, who makes it all possible. And as you're walking with him and you're in his presence, because what an honor that we are invited. God is a God of invitation and desire, and he invites us into his presence. Oh my goodness. And so as we are invited into his presence and we learn about who he is, as you're in relationship with someone, like whether it be a friend or a boyfriend or whatever, you begin to reflect the attributes of that person, like the way you laugh or the way you talk. Oh, I can tell that you guys are friends because you guys sound alike. That's what it's like to have relationship with the living God through Yeshua, through Jesus the Messiah, Emmanuel, God with us. That's what it's like. So as we're in his presence, we learn about who he is, and then in life, we reflect the heart, chesed, the loving kindness of a loving God to others. And then loving your neighbor as yourself, like you're becoming the neighbor. And so it's an outflow from my relationship with the living God daily. Then as those I come in contact with, it's an outflow of his character, not mine. And so how fulfilling is that the God of the universe wants to teach us about who he is and has invited us to walk with him. I just don't want to miss a day. So.
Okay.
So my most fulfilling thing is it's just nice to have a sort of guidebook, a rule book. So I'm not waking up in the morning and then figuring out, like going throughout my day and doing my job and raising my kids, and like that's just what I'm doing. I'm waking up, I say a prayer, I wash my hands, I get dressed, I wash my hands again, I say a prayer before I eat food. When I'm eating my food, when I'm making my food in the kitchen, I keep kosher, and the meat's on one side and dairy's on the other side. I have 2 separate sinks, 2 separate drawers for everything. And, you know, at the end of the day, even if it is one of those days where I'm like, oh my God, I did nothing today, I did something. I followed the rules. I did something at the end of the day, so that was fulfilling. And I think another very fulfilling thing for me personally, and I think as like a woman, woman in general, but like I feel like in Judaism and religion, conceiving and creating a child is the closest thing that we could come to understanding creating something from nothing, ex nihilo. So it's the closest that we can come to grasping the concept of God. So that personally for me, like, is mind-blowing, and I appreciate that very much, and it is very fulfilling.
I feel most fulfilled because of my relationship with God, and when I feel that I'm being led by God's Spirit, when I'm feeling the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, charity, the love of God, endurance, all those things. In partnership with God, I really believe that our life is a co-creation with God. Co-creating children, I love what you said. That's such a godly act, right? To bring a child into the world. And I think we're co-creating with God in so many ways. And so anytime I feel like I'm partnering to serve and to bless and to hold hands metaphorically with others to witness the love of God and try to live that out in the world. That's when I feel most fulfilled. So.
I just want to say something. I love being on panels like this because in my mind, every time they speak, I'm like, I totally agree. We have so much in common, and it's, even though we're different religions and stuff, but we really live our lives with the same purpose and goal and wanting to get close to God and please God and do the right thing. And I find it always religious people make really good friends. So.
Yeah. Thank you all. As we close up our panel tonight, we're going to have Chaplain Jim Slaughter say a few words, but first I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. For those of you that stuck it out till the end, nice job. I hope your homework gets done. And we're really glad that you were able to be here. Do remember to fill out the activity in the back if you have the time. And yeah, as Maysa was saying, it is such a blessing to be able to sit with people of other faiths and be able to get to know them better and understand them. I think we can all, especially in Utah with a more homogenous population, take Maysa's advice in asking questions. When you're getting to know people of other faiths, don't be afraid to ask questions. And obviously there's respectful ways to do that, but don't be afraid, because I think most people really do want to talk about their faiths. They want to know how to get to know you better, and they want you to understand where they're coming from. And if we can implement that in our lives, we can have better relationships with people around us and just better society as a whole. And I also think it's just a cool opportunity to share the deepest parts of ourselves with each other. So if we can band together with other women of faith just to learn more about the world that we live in, the people that surround us, I think that's a really beautiful way to live life. And like I said at the beginning, that's not saying that you have to agree with everyone. Every woman on this stage has a very different perspective in a lot of ways, and yet they're all sitting here in peace with one another and willingness to learn. And all of you are willing to hear from them as well. So that's just my hope for all of us, is that we would be comfortable getting to know the people around us, comfortable with our differences, and willing to sit in any discomfort that we find to have a better world. So I'm going to give this mic to Jim, and he can go ahead. It's not on. There you go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. If we could give our special guests another big hand. We really appreciate them taking time to be with us and share what they've shared with us. I want Leah to stand up. This is Leah's last semester at BYU, and she's leaving me. She's worked for me for 3 years, and this is her third one. And I just wanted to recognize her because she does a lot of hard work to put these together. So we've got these lovely flowers for you. Like this. But yeah, it does take a lot of work, and we just really appreciate her and want to know how much we're going to miss her, and we're going to wish her the best. I mean, she's not leaving right away, and again, thank you for supporting this, and wish you a good evening, and thank you again.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yay.
Really special.
Yeah.